up. Stand up where you are. Stand up where you are. All right, here we go. Hey, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. All right, now I'm going to give you the answer to the question. But what I need from you is I need you to say it loud, and I need you to say it at the same time as the guy next to you. All right. So the first question is going to be, what are we going to do? All right. So your answer is going to be dominate. All right. Here we go. Let's try that one. What are we going to do?
Dominate.
All right. A little more feeling this time. All right. Here we go. The second question is going to be, how are we going to do it? All right. So your answer is attitude, effort, execution, and you're going to give a big clap again. Let's try that second question. How are we going to do it?
Attitude, effort, execution.
Not bad. All right. Let's put them together. Here we go. What are we going to do?
Dominate.
How are we going to do it?
Attitude, effort, execution.
Have a seat, have a seat. Thanks for that. Always like to get the group juiced up a little bit. Takes me back to the glory days. Some of you as well, probably, right? So, thank you for that participation. It's an honor to be here. Anytime you get a chance to get in front of a group and share some experiences and articulate a vision and some of the things you've been a part of, it's an honor. So, thank you to Jeff for that. Jeff and I became acquainted probably 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, from seeing each other consistently at the gym in the morning, and immediately got a mutual respect for one another. I think we both approach life the same way: hard work, dedication, being consistent. Some of the things that we'll talk about a little bit today. So again, honored to be here, guys. So the agenda really, and Jeff I was listening to him kind of brief you guys and kind of deliver his vision as well, but we're talking about the word culture, right? So that's kind of what we're going to discuss today. So the agenda will be, I'm going to go through a little of my background, really from 0 to 36 pretty quickly, all right? Just touch on a few things that I think are important and at least establish some credibility for why am I even standing in front of you at this point in time, all right? And then we'll talk about culture. We'll talk about the definition and maybe how it relates to you and what you've heard about it before, right? It's kind of a term that gets used quite often and maybe a little loosely as well. And then we'll go into the 3 characteristics I've identified as that are some very important characteristics of a high-performing, championship caliber culture, right? And go from there. All right, so I'm Steve Cantor. I'm originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. Probably took about 2 words for you to figure out I'm not from around here, right? So I spent most of my life in the state of Virginia. And really my life started off a little dysfunctional early on and not necessarily unique to me. Many of you may have gone through similar situations, but I came from a broken home. My parents got divorced when I was 3 years old. My father was physically and mentally abusive to my mom. Now, she had enough guts to get my brother and I out of that situation, thank goodness. And so, right off the bat, you know, you've got a little bit of dysfunction, you've got some drama there early on in your lifetime. And so we went through kind of the visitations with my dad. He still was around until I was about 5 years old. And then after a long weekend of visitation, and my brother and I probably bickering back and forth, he's 3 years older than me. My dad stood in the doorway of our house and he told my mom, "I never want to see those jerks again." I say, wow, okay, so well, that's probably the one promise the guy ever kept, because 31 years later, I've never seen him. So early on, you're going through these things, and I firmly believe you've got an event plus a reaction determines your outcome, right? My brother dealt with it a little differently than me. He went down a different path, probably wasn't as successful for a while, and then turned it around. I didn't take it as hard, maybe because I was younger, but I was able to kind of go beyond that and not really let it impact me quite as much as my older brother. Now, I was fortunate. I was into sports pretty early on, so I was passionate about those, and I had some really good coaches that were the male influences in my life, that I was able to gravitate to them, and they were able to instill in me the important things. Some of the things we'll talk about today: the accountability, being dependable, consistent, all the things that you hear every employer describe about their perfect employee, right, or the guy they're trying to hire. So I was fortunate that was the case pretty early on. And those coaches, really, the impact they made on me was one of the reasons I actually pursued that profession, was because of that impact. So throughout middle school, high school, I took what I would consider kind of average genetics. And I was able to work hard enough to turn myself into a Division I football player. That was my goal and my dream to do that. So I went on, I played football at Virginia Tech. And during kind of the glory years, the Michael Vick era, and some very, very talented folks there. And I was fortunate I went there, was able to compete with some of the nation's best, whether it was within our own team or some other pretty prominent programs. It was about 40 pounds ago as well. So, but one of the more important things about my journey really through Virginia Tech was I played for a Hall of Fame coach. You know, Coach Frank Beamer, whether you know much about college football up this way or probably follow the pros a little more, but Coach Frank Beamer was at Virginia Tech for close to 30 years. He's the third winningest coach in college football history. So I got to play for a guy and really be a part of a program during some of the best years, really that era right there at Virginia Tech, and learn a lot about the word culture, right? A lot about how to establish a championship caliber program and organization. I established a reputation there as being a hard worker, a guy that was tough and hard-nosed and really could probably be a pretty good football coach. You know, I had no pro aspirations, wasn't good enough, but I did like football enough to want to pursue that. So they asked me to stay on there, and that's really what started an 11-year coaching career for me. So I stayed there and coached, and again, got to be around some of the important aspects of building a great organization with organization, good people, surrounding yourself with the right folks, right? Letting them do their job, but also delegating responsibilities properly. And so I was able to learn a lot of that at a pretty young age in coaching. And again, I did that for 11 years. Coaching is really what brought me to the Ocean State. So I was down at Norfolk State University. We had just won the conference championship. It's 1AA football. Had the player of the year in the conference. And then I came up to University of Rhode Island. And any of you that have been around here long enough know there's some struggles over at University of Rhode Island, right? When it comes to football for sure, but really within their athletic department. There's a lot of things over there that could be done better probably. Maybe they're moving in that direction. But so it was a challenge. But again, never shied away from challenges. It was great to be able to come and have the biggest impact I could have and try to help the program. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. You know, after 2 years, we got let go. And so the head coach got let go, really everybody goes, right? And ended up staying in the area. I moved over. Now, I wasn't Coach Steve Cantor anymore. I was corporate Steve Cantor, right? I went into the private sector. I was fortunate. I landed over at APC by Schneider Electric. And that's actually where my wife was working at the time. So I ended up going over there. And much like any of you guys, you're willing to take whatever job, right? At that time, I was as humble as they get. I went in on the front line. I was taking calls on the call center at 33 years old, and got 2 master's degrees, was a coach for a long time, and here are these other good people right out of college, but I'm 33 doing it, and did it with a smile, and tried to be as competitive as I could be. After 2 months, I was leading the program. I was leading that whole organization, the sales teams on the call center, and doing that for 2.5 years, never looked back. And was fortunate to be able to hire some really good people out of college, and then we established a highly productive, extremely successful culture and organization over there that people wanted to be a part of. And so we had a lot of success. A lot of people made a lot of money. I made a little bit of it, but there was how big business works. Now I'm over at Active Data Solutions doing something similar over there, trying to really tighten up some processes. I do some project management over there, but a lot of it is holding people accountable, driving human behavior, and really building a culture that people want to be a part of. All right. So that's kind of where I am. That's maybe the credibility that I have in order to be able to stand in front of a successful group of guys already and talk a little bit about what I see as, and I think Jeff and I are aligned through our conversations of what it takes in order to elevate Sweenor Builders maybe to the next level, or any other organization that you could be a part of. So culture. So any of you guys that have ever been on team sports, maybe individual sports, or even if you just follow sports, you've heard this word probably overused at some point, right? And they talk about teams and what kind of culture they have. Well, every organization or team has culture. Whether they've worked hard to establish it, whether it's one they're proud of, whether it's one that you would want to be a part of, right? They have it one way or the other. So now the ones that separate themselves, The ones we're talking about were high performance, championship caliber, ones that get picked for this old house, right? Ones that do those things, those teams and organizations work hard at building a culture that people want to be a part of. All right, so culture to me is behaviors within an organization, right? Of the humans within the organization. Whether it's the vision, the norms, the habits, right? When you walk on a job site or you walk in a building, typically you can tell a little bit about what kind of culture. Do people enjoy working there? Are they smiling? Or are they goofing off and not being very productive? You can tell that pretty quickly, all right? So that's what I see as culture. That's kind of the definition in my book. So what I've done is I've identified 3 things that I think are important. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm only going to use up about 30 minutes of your time, right? So, but I'm going to talk about 3 things that I think are important, and I've got a few stories that I think kind of validate those as we go. So first characteristic, discipline. And I'm not talking about punishment, right? Any of you parents out there, I've got a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old, so we'll talk about discipline, or at least think about that quite a bit, right? But I'm talking more about self-discipline. I'm talking about structure within your life, right? Consistency. Are you the same guy every day? Bill Belichick says, what's more important than ability? Dependability, right? Are you dependable? Can we trust you, and can we lean on you? Those are the types of things. And every coach that's ever done it, again, I'll relate a lot of this to athletics because that's been my background for the majority of my life. But everybody's sitting in that room with all the coaches and saying, can I trust Steve Cantor, that player, right? Is he dependable? So many of you that are familiar with the Patriots organization, and I'm kind of, hey, when in Rome, root for the right group, right? I mean, but you have to respect what they're all about, is they take some guys that are maybe a little less talented than the group, than some of the other players, right? And they play, and they're highly successful within that organization because of what? Dependability. They know that Julian Edelman is going to catch the ball on 3rd and 7, and they throw it to him, or Chris Hogan, or one of these guys that maybe everybody says, why do they play versus someone else, right? So it's all about dependability. So you have to be that to Jeff and anybody else up the chain, right? You have to be that guy that they say, man, I can count on him. I can lean on him. I can hand him the keys and let him lock this place up at night and not worry about, is all this going to be here tomorrow, right? It's all about that consistency and discipline. So I got a quick story, and some of you may be familiar with this. This hit national news a couple years ago, but a guy that really lived what we're talking about from consistency and dependability standpoint, a gentleman named James Robertson. He was a 56-year-old Detroit, Michigan native. Now, when I think of Detroit, Michigan, I think of cold, right? Their winters are probably more brutal than ours, or at least along the same lines, right? And I think of crime, to be honest with you, right? Well, James Robertson was 56 years old about 10 years before that, before they ran this story, so he was, I guess, around 46. James was driving a 1988 Honda Accord. He was a factory worker in Detroit, making $10.55 an hour. And about around 2005 or 6, his car breaks down. That 1988 Honda Accord breaks down. Well, James is a hard-working, consistent, dependable employee. So what's he do? He gets out and he uses these 2 legs and he walks his ass to work. Well, guess what? He lives 10 miles from work. So he walks 10 miles to work. He works. He gets out late at night. He walks 10 miles back. It's cold in Detroit. He has to walk through some rough neighborhoods to get there. Now, I know all of us can probably admit we've stayed out of work for something less, right? Or whatever it may be. But this guy did this for 5 days a week for 10 years. 10 years. Now, most of us would say, well, at that time, maybe he's got some sick days, right? Maybe he called in sick. No, James Robertson, and again, this is on, you can find this information, but James Robertson actually set records for attendance and performance during that decade. So it's all about being consistent and being dependable. And that's what all of us are looking for, whether it's Sweenor Builders or another company that has a culture of high performance and championship caliber performance. You're looking for a bunch of guys that are consistent and dependable, right? So I think that's a challenge to all of us. Now, next point, accountability. Now, of course, accountability can fall into a little bit of the self-discipline portion of it as well. But what I mean by, and I heard Jeff stressing this a few minutes ago, accountability to each other. To each other. It's all about strength of unit, man. In 2014, the United States military, they released the results from a poll that they did for all U.S. military personnel. And they asked them a number of questions, but a couple of them stuck out. They said, who do you fight for? And when things get rough, who do you think about? And everybody said, oh, well, of course it's going to be family, it's going to be flag, it's going to be country. No, it was the guy next to him. Strength of unit. Right? There's a great quote that says, the true soldier fights not because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. Right? It's all about the guy next to you, man. It's all about how I do my job impacts the guy next to me. And you have to have accountability amongst the group. Now, I don't know a lot about construction, but I know that within every team and organization, there's a subgroup within a group, right? There's some guys that are sitting in here that handle the framing. There's some guys that do the roofing. Some guys that do some plumbing, whatever it all is, right? There's a lot of those subgroups. It may be 2, it may be 5 guys, whatever it is. Are you accountable to the guy next to you? Right? How you do your job, how does it impact the guy? Hey, it's Cinco de Mayo, right? What you do tonight may impact how you work tomorrow, right? I mean, you have to have some accountability there, all right? So a great story that I came across when I read a lot, came across this story about accountability a few years back. In the 1996 Summer Olympics, they were in Atlanta, Georgia. Many of you probably remember that. The Great Britain men's 8 crew team, they finished 8th overall. So they had a core nucleus of guys coming back. Obviously, they weren't happy with their performance, 8th overall. They weren't super happy about that. So they had this core nucleus of guys coming back, and they said, hey, how are we going to get to where we want to be? Which in your mind is the best builder in Rhode Island and New England, right? For them, it was a gold medal. Like all of us, we do our job probably to be the best, right? At what we do. So they talk about gold medal. So they came up with a phrase, will it make the boat go faster? And their phrase was their way of holding each other accountable and even themselves accountable for everything they do. So if a guy wants to go out tonight and he has to be a part of this practice the next day when we're talking crew, or maybe he has to work, hey, is that going to make the boat go faster? Will it make the boat go faster? And that was the way they held each other accountable for their actions and how they approached their job each day, right? Because again, you have to have a level of accountability that you can call a guy out in a professional way and that he's not going to be overly sensitive, right? That he's going to be able to respond in a way that says, this guy's looking out for my best interest just like I want to look out for his, because we're all in this together. We all have the same end goal, which is to be successful, of course, make enough money to support yourself and your family, whatever it may be. All right? Well, those guys went on, they held that on for 4 years. That's a long time to wait, right? And they said, will it make the boat go faster? For 4 years, they continued to ask each other and themselves that, and they won a gold medal in the Sydney 2000 Olympics. And then, of course, a couple of those guys went on, they wrote a book about it. Why wouldn't you, right? They wrote a book about it and go out and speak and talk to organizations just like this about the same type of accountability, and that was their mindset. So I think that's something to ponder and talk about and think about, right? Is that if you're trying to be as tight-knit of a group as you can be and be as successful, you have to be accountable to the guy next to you and, of course, to yourself, that accountability mirror. All right, lastly, third point, elite mindset. And Jeff and I have had a couple long conversations about things, but how you do anything is how you do everything. So whether that means pushing the broom to sweep this place up at the end of the day, that should be just as important as putting a roof on the house. It should be just as important, right? So how you do anything is how you do everything. Do you take pride in the work you do? How you greet the client? You know, what your job site looks like. Are you on time to work? Those types of things, right? So it's all about that elite mindset, but also it's all about growth. Are you where you want to be within the company? within where you are in your household, how much money you make, all the things that you feel like you can control? Are you 1% better every day? I always challenge myself and say, did you get better today? 1% better. That's all you have to do. All you guys that own a smartphone in here, which is probably the majority, right? If you're not, that's a struggle, probably, right? But when you have a smartphone, you've got an internet connection, you've got access to podcasts, you've got access to books, audio books, videos, right? You can sign up for classes on that smartphone and take any class and really explore anything that you would want to do in terms of building some equity in yourself, right? The only ceiling that exists is the one you create for yourself. So do you have that elite mindset that you're pursuing growth and progress on a daily basis, right? I think that's important. And lastly, a motto that I kind of use for myself, I stole this throughout coaching. It was a motto that San Antonio Spurs, I know they use it, or they have in the past, Tampa Bay Buccaneers when John Gruden was there, but pound the rock. So really the motto is that there's this giant rock there, and that symbolizes daily tasks, hardships, whatever it may be, right? And are you willing to pick up that sledgehammer and continue to take hacks at that rock to break that thing down? Because we all know that it takes persistence to do that, right? Your hands are going to get blistered, your back's going to ache a little bit, maybe not the big fella, but one way or the other, right? You're going to keep taking hacks at that big old rock. Do you have the fortitude to do that, right? Are you prepared to continue to do that daily? And that's really, like Jeff was mentioning, how you show up to the job site. Do you show up with that sledgehammer in hand, ready to build a house in the snow? I mean, that's what you guys do, right? It's cold. There's things you have to do. Or do you show up ready to do that? Or do we hide under the sheets hoping that somebody else does the work, right? So back in the early 1900s, there was a journalist that highlighted the work of a stonecutter. And this is really where that pound the rock thing comes from. And there's a stonecutter credo that I'll read to you. It's brief, but it says, when nothing seems to help, I go look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times without as much as a crack showing in it, which can be demoralizing, right? You continue to take hacks. Yet at the 101st blow, it will split in two. And I know it was not that blow that did it, but all that had gone before, right? It's not that one magical hack. You're not going to win the lottery tomorrow, guys. But you're going to keep taking that hammer and swinging at that rock in order to become the best version of yourself, right? And some of you guys that are a little more veteran, there's a quote out there for guys that are veterans that have maybe arrived a little bit in terms of where their skill set is. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship, right? So the minute it becomes easy, people tend to just kind of coast along a little bit, right? Or challenge yourself to keep picking that hammer up, swinging at that rock, helping the guys around you become better, including yourself, right? And that's where you become more accountable to the group. You've got greater self-discipline. You're going to show up to work on time, ready to go. And then that's when the culture becomes something that everybody's coaching each other. Everybody's able to hold each other accountable without anybody, when they do it in a professional way, without anybody being a little too sensitive. All right, and everybody has that goal and the same vision in mind for what this place needs to be and actually can be. All right, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for your time, man. Any questions at all, guys? I'm certainly typically pretty transparent with